to the highlights of Influence 2018. After July, a couple of people said to Lynn, could we do a recap? She said, yes, we could. And I said, I will help you. And it only took me 3 months. So think of it as only 12 short weeks before we got it put together. And so Kevin, were you able to join us as well? Let me roll along. Kevin thought he might be able to come, so we'll see if so. So the folks who were with Influence who were able to join us tonight, we have our president. And so Lynn is here. Thank you. Carl is going to come in and out because he is also wrangling two twins. Bill Gertine is here till 7:30, and I'll host us. So a couple of questions. We got a series of questions. We'll just do a round table on it. Reasons you went to Influence, and what was your conference strategy? Why'd you go hear certain people? Why'd you choose to attend the events you did? Was there a theme or a strategy you had in mind? Who'd like to kick it off?
Well, I will. I think more than anything else, I think it energizes me to see others who do what I do that I don't get to see very often, and around the country meet others that experience the very same things that I experience. The niche that I have is it's somewhat narrow in dealing with the professional sports teams that I have, and so to see those people that go through the same trials and tribulations I do is kind of a neat experience. So it's one of the big reasons. And frankly, one of the bigger reasons is to get to know all of my NSA Illinois friends a little better. And boy, we got to do that.
Yeah, so true. Say a little more about that. I know you have to leave at 7:30, and that's kind of one of the questions after you're gone. So say a little more about that. How'd that work?
Well, it's fascinating. Because I'm incoming president, we got to have a little bit of a precursor. It was with Lynn, and we got to know some of the others from within the other chapters. And there was a session just for us for that half day, which I thought was extraordinary. Got us kicked off in the right direction. We got to meet who our mentor is from the Texas chapter. We got really kind of indoctrinated in a unique way at the very beginning. And throughout the entire 4 days, it was terrific to hang out with all of our compatriots. We saw each other in the hallways. We hung out with each other at dinners and things. And you get to know your fellow Illinoisans in just a far different way when you experience Influence in this way.
Well, thank you, sir. Lynn, any thoughts as to your strategy?
I wanted to broaden my horizon when I took a look at the different types of programs that were offered. So a couple of them I went to, one on how to do more business with the federal government, how to do speaking in front of college audiences, things I've never done and never would have thought of if I hadn't taken a look at the offerings at Influence. I was like, okay, let's take a look at things that are vastly different from what I do and see if those things would fit for me. And at the same time, of course, being a neuroscience nerd, I wanted to go to a couple of them of people who were talking about, in a similar space than me, so I could see how it is that they spoke and compare what they were, how they did things to how I did things. And as Bill mentioned, there was the whole social aspect of it as well. What he didn't mention is that the night of what's now called NSA Prom, which I was totally unprepared for, by the way. So if you have never been to Influence, know that there is a big night where people get lots of awards and the women break out their sparkle dresses. So if you're going to Influence, bring your sparkle dress along. And after that, there was a jam session with all of the speakers who played instruments. And Bill invited me to that. He was great on the keyboards, and I ended up singing for a while. So there's like a totally different take than what I expected just in that experience alone. And by the way, since Bill was mentioning the whole idea about incoming presidents and current presidents having a special session at the beginning of the conference, one of the blessings of being president is that Influence, your conference fee is paid for by the chapter. So that's their thank you for your year of service. And and it's a wonderful thing. It was literally the first Influence I'd ever been to, and I had it on my bucket list. I need to go to Influence. And when somebody said, okay, be president, they'll pay for it, I said,
That's good. And I think it's a wonderful thing, because I think that means you get like $4 an hour, Lynn. So thank you very much. All right. Well, great. And Carl, are you able to join us by voice?
Well, it depends if you like the crying in the background or not.
I have it makes me
yes.
feel nostalgic.
Yeah, so I'll try to be the best I can with audio. So I joined NSA about 2.5 years ago, and the month that I joined was in May. And I remember when I joined, people were like, oh, well, are you going to go to Influence? And it was just a couple of months away. I was like, why just join? I'm not about to drop this kind of money to go to some conference that I'm sure nobody goes to. And then after the conference ended, I saw the picture of all the Illinois people. I'm like, oh, this is actually a legit conference. And then saw the pictures from the national, or from the other chapters. And I said, okay, well, this is, I guess, actually a thing. And then I went to the Maggiano's kind of meetup that basically is this webinar today, but in physical form. And it was basically people coming back and saying, you know, what did they experience? What did they think? What did they learn? And so it became something that I wanted to do. So I marked my calendar for the next year, but that ended up falling on my wedding anniversary, plus my wife turned out to be pregnant with the crying that you hear in the background. So that wasn't going to happen. And so I ended up putting it on my calendar for this year. And ultimately, I think I would echo what most of you have said is, you know, just an opportunity to see what other people in similar spaces are doing. To me, you know, I was just going with a very open mind of, I'd like to see what all of these other professional speakers, trainers, facilitators do, similar to me and different from me. So just, you know, I went down with a very open mind and a very sponge-like personality, just to meet people, learn as much as I can, and see what all this is about. I did not really go down with a strategy of any kind, but more so just to soak it in, and then maybe next year I'll be a little bit more strategic about what I do.
Got it. Hey, Kevin, any thoughts about why you went? I know you've been a regular at Influence. Why do you go? Did you have a particular strategy this year?
I'm sorry, who are you talking to?
Kevin.
Kevin, me. Oh, yeah. I go every year. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you great.
Yeah, I go every year, and I mostly go for what's in between the sessions. So what I hear in the bathrooms and the hallways, and going out to lunch and breakfast and things like that. So that's my strategy. And then the extras are what I might pick up at the meetings. So and I'm mostly interested in kind of what did people learn. So I always ask people, what did you learn? And that's the thing that I pick up most. If I ask them what they do for a living, we're in for a half hour of boring talk.
Well, we are speakers, aren't we?
Yeah, right. That's right. But so I thought this last Influence was valuable in that respect, very valuable. And I've been to the winter workshop, which was really, really good. So,
well, you know, a lot of people haven't really heard of the winter workshop. Take a moment and just compare and contrast Influence, kind of the big, for those of you who might be new, Influence is the big national event. What's Winter Conference and how's it different?
Winter's very small, and 300, 400, 500 people. So you can make the rounds very quickly. It's a little more focused. They can't do everything, and it's a little bit less rah-rah. So you really get more of a little bit of a clubby feeling with one another. One of the very first ones back in the 80s that they did, we were in, I think, Newport Beach, and they told us to get ready for dinner and get dressed up, and they would take us in limousines to the party. So we walk out the front door of the hotel. There are limousines lined up end to end. You get in the limousine leaves, it makes a left turn, another left turn, and it drops you at the back of the hotel where you get out of the limousine. And as you're entering the ballroom, they had Marilyn Monroe lookalikes, Clark Gable lookalikes, all these famous, and they would just fawn all over you, and people were taking pictures of you. It was hysterical. So that kind of stuff. I mean, I remember that one very clearly from the 80s. We had a ball during that one, and I think that's the advantage. I like the winter ones actually better than the summer ones because they're small. You get to meet a lot of people and have really significant conversations.
That's a good point.
So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Thank you much.
Yep.
What content did you enjoy most? Why? And what'd you go see? What would you recommend? I know one of the things that people have asked me at our last live session with Andy Masters, who did a session at Influence this year, was, hey, what are the best sessions that I should listen to in recordings? And so let's let Lynn talk about why that's important for members. One of the new member benefits, and then we'll find out from people what their list is.
Okay. There is on Google Docs, and next week or the week after, depending upon when we get out the note, there will be instructions on how to find this stuff. And all you need to have access to it is the link that we'll send. And you also need to have a Google account. So any Gmail account that you have will be just fine. And what happened is that one of our members, Amy Sagami, who did not go to Influence this year, volunteered to curate all of the recordings of the different sessions. And you will, once you get to the Google Docs page, you will see the name of each of the sessions. And you can click on that and then hear the audio recording from that session. Most of the sessions were recorded, not all of them, and we were blessed to have Andy Masters come through earlier in October and give us a deeper dive into his session, because it turned out that the audio on his session did not work. Yes, thank you, Amy. So Amy spent a lot of time doing this stuff. She also did the same thing, by the way, for Influence 2017. So you can see not only, or listen to not only Influence 2018, but Influence 2017 as a result of Amy's work. She made this very accessible for all of us. And by the way, when we send out the link that gives you access to this, this is a member benefit. So please don't share it with people who are not NSA Illinois members. This is one of the beauties of the money that you forked over for the chapter. And by the way, I think that all of the sessions, if you were to buy them on your own, are something like $500. So, yeah, this is free. You know, and when I spoke with Amy, and I said, so you've done this, and you know what all the sessions are about now. What would you recommend to people on how to get the most out of it? And she said, you know, just go through, see what looks interesting to you, and sample a bunch of different things. It's not like there's any magic to doing things from beginning to end. And, you know, and if there's a topic that looks interesting to you, you know, listen to a couple of minutes of it, see if it's worth your time. And, you know, once again, bless you, Amy Sagami, for having made it easy for the rest of us to benefit from either a replay of this because we saw the session, or because there were so many sessions, and I'm sure the rest of you felt the same. There were times when I thought, geez, I'd love to go to 3 of these things, and I can only pick one. And because of the blessing of her work, we now have access to all of them.
Excellent. Because of that, let's take a couple of minutes and just talk about what sessions people went to that they would recommend to other people. And I'll take notes, and we'll put together a list to go along with the recordings, just kind of people's recommended list. So what I heard from some people who were not able to join us, but who sent in their recommendations, some people really like Rory Vaden's session. We had Rory in September here to kick off our live NSA Illinois season, and people were big fans of that. And then David Mirman Scott, Sally Hogshead. I went to that session. It was she's always good, and she's a true pro. Phil Jones, Lori Guest said that I really like Phil Jones' session, and then Lori Guest got some good props for her session. Matter of fact, she's coming to do her session in December for our live experience, and it's on how you get more spin business. Brand new content. I know we just had her 3 years ago, but it's a brand new session she's not done before, so you can see that one live. The rest of you, Bill will make sure to get you before you have to jump off. What'd you go see? What would you recommend?
I have 3, and there are a couple of nuggets from each of those 3 that'll kind of whet your appetite here a little bit. So I would agree with Amy. These recordings are kind of like chicken soup for the NSA Illinois soul. You know, you can go in, get a little bit of it, you know, take some away, and so you don't have to spend too much time with it. But if you've got a nice drive, you can listen to the whole hour or hour and a half and get a lot from it. So the three I would suggest, and I chose these for three very specific reasons. Amy and Michael Port did a breakout after their big session on the stage on performance art. And it had to do with the way in which to do a keynote or anything that you might do on the stage itself. And they started out talking about performers who should not be necessarily criticized for their work. Actors, people in movies and artists and such, they don't get criticized, but we get picked apart all the time for the kind of work that we do. And so they had a 7-step breakdown of how you could really start from scratch and build a topic and a speech and a performance that you can be really proud of. And it was really, really good to watch that. They had a young lady come up during a portion of it and do a portion of her own speech. And then they had suggested to her to do to look at her operative words in a particular thought that she had. And so she said the speech, and then she came out and literally said, okay, now change these words. And I even wrote it down. It was so good. She said, true love and connection are so beautiful and so rare. And before she did that, she just said the thing all the way through. So it was brilliant to see the transformation that they were able to do with that one person. It's worth it just to listen to that one alone. I took a lot from it, and I think that's one you'll probably take some notes with once you get there. So that's Amy and Michael Port. There was since I'm a little bit of a performer myself, I wanted to try and include more of that. So there was one called Meld Your Message with Mega Entertainment Value. And this was given by 3 individuals, many of whom NSAers will know well. Tim Gard, who will be with us in the spring, Mike Rayburn, who's an amazing virtuoso guitarist, and Dan Thurman, who's our current president, who does amazing handstands and things on the lectern that you actually have to see to believe. But they were talking a little bit about how it is that you entertain, but also leave a message at the same time. It's not enough just to be a clown or a performer or whatever, but to actually have a message that fits that which you are doing. And it's extraordinary stuff to be able to hear. I can't do it justice by picking out a nugget or two, but they talked about storyboarding and using colored Post-its to kind of give you this lows and highs, because each of the performers up on the stage have almost a way in which they flow their speeches from a low point to a high point, and then they bring them up and then bring them down again. Again, I can't do it justice by just talking here, but it really is worth the time to be able to talk to them. One of the things they did is talked about props. And a very good piece of advice that Tim Gard had given was hold your props back. Do not put them on the stage or anywhere near where people could see them, just in case you have to cut them out due to time constraints. Because you don't want people, you don't want people seeing your props if you are going to cut them out, because people will think they're missing something if a prop goes unused.
Right.
So I thought that was a really good little piece of advice, but there's at least a dozen little pieces in there that I thought were really extraordinary. I think are worth listening to that piece. And then the third one I wanted to, because I wanted to know a little bit more about podcasting. It's become much more of a thing. People seem to be doing it a whole lot more. I work with a lot of millennials, and there seems to be this wave of millennials who are listening to podcasts. And so I wanted to know a little more about how I might be able to do that and what would be involved. And Jeffrey Hazlett, who we're actually having in January, gave a session along with many, many other podcasters that are on his particular channel. And he's always... Poor Jeffrey, he's always selling something. But in this case, it was, he was talking about how many of these others that are on his channel called All Business are doing as good a job as they are. They had Lou Diamond, Jeannie Walters, Michelle Villalobos, Drew Taylor, Susan Friedman, and Dr. Willie Jolly was also in that session. And so they were all talking about how each of them are monetizing podcasts. And a couple of the pieces I took from that are, if you're really kind of measuring how good a podcast is or whether or not it's something you want to do, downloads, those numbers of downloads they have don't matter. What you want to look at is ask yourself, why? Why are you doing this? If you want to be seen as an expert, if you want to promote your expertise or promote your brand or promote sports, then
Yeah.
podcasting is a great thing. It's a nurture strategy. It is not something that is measured in one podcast or just somehow you're this overnight success because of a single podcast. It's to be able to drip it out over a longer period of time. They go through some excellent things about if you get into podcasting, how should you invite guests and which guests make best podcast guests and why you should and what you should demand of your podcast guests in order to make it more valuable for you and for them. So if you're thinking about podcasting at all as a means of being able to multiply your brand or to move it out, it was an outstanding way in which to just introduce yourself to what it takes. One of the ideas that Jeffrey had brought up, and I think one of his people did, he really, really wanted someone on one of his podcasts. And so he actually sent to him through Amazon, I believe, a microphone, a little $20 or $30 microphone, kind of like this, but a lot cheaper than this. And it's, these kind of the microphones that just plug into the USB port. And with a note saying, look, all you need now is a computer and we can get on the podcast together. And he asked him to keep the microphone and it worked. And he was able to get him on board.
That's
and
great.
It's a lot of fun to do. So for anyone who's interested in podcasting, I heartily recommend Jeffrey Hazlett's breakout on podcasting. That's just one of the many things that he has curated for us.
Nice.
Well, Bill, we've got 6 more minutes before you have to bolt. And so let me jump down to, for you, let me jump down to question 5. What are your takeaways?
Well, more than anything else, I realized, and this is really valuable for those who've never been to Influence, sometimes you learn about things you shouldn't do or things that probably aren't time for you. And I learned that podcasting...
Well, now you got my attention.
Well, podcasting is not for me right now because of the many other things that I am doing. I learned so much about what it takes to do a successful podcast that I successfully decided that is not for me. And that was a killer because I was all ready for it. I'm kind of the radio guy. And so it's kind of my personality. And it was kind of a bummer for me to think, oh, geez, I guess I ruled myself out of this. But I'm really glad that I went to that because now when I'm ready, I will know when I'm ready and it won't be long. I just know it's not right now.
And you'll be like the rest of us, not implementing stuff we learned. So.
Yeah, I guess it makes it very easy to say, well, that's why I didn't implement it.
I'm gonna do it. Right. Yeah, that's great.
But I was able to successfully say no to that.
Yeah.
Which to me was as valuable as learning the things to do. So that was probably the biggest thing, Hayden.
Nice.
That's great. Who else? Back to question number 3. Thank you, Bill.
Sure.
And thank you for joining us for the first half. What other sessions did you enjoy most? And I'll keep typing.
I went to Barry Banther's session on how to build a profitable consulting practice from a single speech. And
Was that not killer?
That was a very good presentation. Yeah. Did you go to that one too?
I did.
Yeah. I thought he really did a very, very nice job. And he's got it, he's got his own little thing with it. I mean, he works with certain kinds of clients, but in 1983, I think, Nito told us after a speech, when people would come up and tell him how great it was, he said, thank you, but I'm a little frustrated because we just barely touched the surface. Can I call you next week and maybe give you some ideas? And that developed his consulting practice. And that's what did some of my consulting practice. But what I liked about what Banther said is he said, spread your expertise across the spectrum. Consider your content free. You charge for the channel. And the channel is your speech training, podcasts, webinar, e-zine. He's got about 20 or 30 things here. Your private Twitter, all that sort of stuff. And then he makes himself available for, I think he said 2 hours every day. He tells them when he's completely free, and all of his clients can call him whenever they want, or text him, or do anything like that. So he was very, very interesting, but he's really stressed that we should use case studies in our speeches, which are stories not about us, but stories about what the client did who worked with us. So he said, focus on what the client did, not on what you did. And apparently he has cataloged all these things so he can pull these out at a moment's notice. I'm teaching a group counseling class at Loyola, and one of the standard books we use is It's a brick. It's so thick you could use it as a doorstop. In fact, I do. And but what this guy did when he's famous, Yalam is his name. He does all the group counseling stuff. What he's done is after every group that he does, now he's a therapist, he sends out a 1 or 2 page email to everyone in the group, whether it's a support group, therapy group, divorce group, on what his thoughts were about the group they just had. So you come out of group, you say goodbye to everybody, your therapist sends you this email the next day, and then then that forms the basis of the books and the writings and the lectures and the teaching that he does, is that kind of thing. And I started doing that in my coaching. So after coaching, I asked the coach to send me an email with what they learned and what was significant. And then I send them back an email based on their email, what I thought was significant. And that becomes our agenda for the next time. So that's what we review. That I found that's better than, okay, we'll talk to you next week, or I'll talk to you next month. So then we have something tangible. And Banther sort of reaffirmed that for me. He also reaffirmed to really be thinking about the consulting end of things rather than just going and trying to get another speech. So there's plenty of work that we can do within the talks that we do. But I love the idea of your content is free, charge for the channels.
Excellent. Lynn, what did you add? What did you really like?
Fun. It was a session that you and I shared, and also Lori guest. It was the one by Phil Jones, and he actually wrote a book.
Oh, right.
Exactly what to say. And by the way, gave free copies to everybody who came to his program.
Right.
And one of the stories that he told, kind of his origin story, is that back in the day, he was actually a furniture salesperson. And whenever he would encounter resistance when he was trying to sell furniture, he would ask people questions and then listen to their answers. And for example, at one point, and I can't remember exactly why, he said it became his job to sell more ottomans, so more footstools. And one of the common resistance factors he encountered was, oh, I don't have room for a footstool. And and his response there was, do you put up a Christmas tree in your living room in the wintertime? And, oh yeah, sure I do. Well, if you have room for a tree, you have room for a footstool. And I thought, yeah, it's so you ask the question. When you encounter resistance, you ask the question. And once again, he had all kinds of wonderful turns of phrases, and particularly he focused on the speaking business. And what do you do when you encounter a price objection, and and those sorts of things. So that for me, and and Guy also does some neuroscience. So once again, I was pulled into that. It was an excellent session that makes you think about the words that you use,
Right.
and and when you encounter resistance, ask people a question, gather more information rather than trying to talk them into or out of something.
Yeah, when he was, he did a winter workshop too, and did the same thing, gave us, and I thought it was really it's a very short book, it's very wise, but it's something that, the basis of it, as you said, is asking questions. Mm-hmm. I think we have so much more influence and power when we ask questions than when we do this elevator speech business, or we start going on and on about ourselves or what we can do for you. And I just love that idea. I'm glad you brought that up. That was really good.
Carl, what do you have for us? What'd you like?
Hopefully the audio's up in the background. No?
I loved Carl from the main stage, by the way.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thanks for the flattery.
I just think he's cute too.
Yeah.
He was cute up there.
Yeah, I did my best. So there were a few sessions that I liked, but I think one that really popped to me was Mark Levy. It was, I think, the last session of one of the last days. His topic was my big sexy idea. And Mark is kind of like a brand positioning statement kind of a guy. He's worked with some very reputable people, some very reputable companies. I think that he worked pretty closely with Simon Sinek to come up with his positioning statements. But I think one of the areas I found most profound about Mark's session was that he actually took us through an exercise, and it kind of began with his own experience, how he went into, he was like, I walked into a Borders bookstore, so you know how long ago this was. But so he's like, I walked into a Borders bookstore and I saw this gentleman who I was familiar with, and I picked up his book and I looked through the table of contents and I looked through it, and, you know, expletives aside, he said, he stole my idea. Like, basically everything in this table of contents was this, you know, proprietary idea that Mark had come up with himself. And he was really pissed, and he went home and he kind of moped about it. But then it kind of sparked a different avenue. And this is where he took us through this little bit of a journey. And he said, you know, what I want you to do is to think about this time where your idea, your, you know, the one thing that you think really separates yourself from everybody else, or the thing that is just going to change the world. And I want you to think back to that time where you came across somebody else's message who you said, you know, darn it, that's my exact same message. And it just pissed you off that you couldn't even sleep at night. And the next day you were just like, I'm beside myself. And he's like, and I want you to think about everything that you thought about and everything that person touched. And then I want you to think about the one piece of that person's idea that they didn't cover that your idea addresses. Basically saying that, you know, somebody's idea, it's just one slice of the idea pie. And that idea pie has many, many slices. Yeah. So it comes up to you to figure out what is the one slice that you are the expert at, that you have the experience in, that is really unique to you, that even though it may fall under the same umbrella, it's profoundly different. And I had never really thought about that. You know, I had actually, Hayden, you and I spoke at the same TEDx event. And there was a philosophy, a concept that I had that it's not groundbreaking, it's not anything new, but the slice of it that I focused on is really quite different than the slices of other people. And so it made you just realize that even though, you know, we are all, you know, unique, our ideas touch upon other people's ideas, and we are all kind of part of, you know, this same umbrella, but it's up to us to figure out the uniqueness that we can serve. So I think what my takeaway from that session is whether it was that philosophy within TEDx or my training business, you know, what is the niche that I am really focused in, and how can I separate that niche from the rest of the umbrella? And that was probably one of the biggest takeaways I had from all of the conference.
I like that, because you're hearing somebody else articulate that idea you didn't do, but it's taking you to the next step of something you can do, rather than
right, absolutely,
discouraged by, oh shit, well, I guess that's not going to work. You know, I think this happened.
Yeah, I mean,
I think this happened to Kramer a few times in Seinfeld, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
That's really
I mean,
good.
even with my training business, there are times where I'm like, you know, there's a lot of other people who do work similar to me, but even in my marketing, and even in some of my storytelling, I'm like, there is this one fine little niche that nobody is in, and that's me. That's where I'm going to stay.
Yeah.
And I find that with a lot of my clients, I say, you know, you got a lot of, you know, similar competition out there, but it's just dissimilar enough from you that, you know, we're happy with what you're able to bring to us.
Right. Right.
So it's really just finding that fine thread that you can live in.
Well,
so that was the main one. There were some other good ones, but that was a really good one.
Give us one more good one so we can put it on the list of things people who attended recommend.
There is, well, this was my first influence. I decided to treat it as though it was my first influence. And I signed up for the Cavett Institute. The Cavett Institute is a pre-conference program that is the day, I don't remember when the conference officially started, but it was the day before. And Cavett is not it's not reserved for first timers. It's just kind of geared towards people who are emerging. Yet, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself emerging. And there were also people in the Cabinet Institute who've been there for like 3 or 4 times in a row. But so I'm trying to remember who was there. Randy Pennington kicked it off. Jeff Blackman.
Cabinet Institute.
Who else was there? Lori Guest.
Jeff Blackman, Margarita Gurry, Lori Guest.
Yeah, Margarita.
Bill Reisman.
Reisman, Jess Pettit closed it. But just some really impressive people, just just super inspiring. And by the time it was over, I was like, I feel like I've been at this conference for a week already, and I've only been here for a day. But it was a great way to be teed up for the rest of the conference. I think that if there was anybody I was truly impressed with, and again, I feel really privileged to have her be part of our community, it was Lori Guest, talking about the spin business and kind of how she looks at her engagements, not just as an opportunity to deliver value, but as an opportunity to get more business from thereafter. And a lot of the ideas and techniques she brought up, I actually went up to her afterwards. I said, you know what, I'm using a lot of these like 90% of the way, but your remaining 10% is like that extra like cherry on top that seals the deal. And, you know, afterwards, I have just very strategically thought of ways I can incorporate her techniques into my selling, my presentation, and just the overall flow of my program. So Cabinet Institute, I thought, was fantastic. And even though it's supposed to be for first timers, I would do it again.
Yeah, that's great. You got my note too, right, Carl? Carl, did you get my note last week?
I did. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Sure.
And I'm glad that worked out for you.
That was fantastic. Yeah, it's great.
I'll chime in about one other thing that NSA did for first timers. They actually gave us an opportunity to have a mentor or a buddy who had been at the conference before. And it was a blessing to have that. It turns out that I knew the person. She was another chapter president. And it was just somebody to do some debriefing with and ask questions about stuff that I wasn't sure of. And it wasn't a one-on-one. There was, she had another buddy as well. And, and it's wonderful to, when you walk into a conference and not really know what's going on, to have somebody that you can pick up the phone or arrange meetings with and get that little bit of extra information so that you don't feel quite so green or overwhelmed. So if you have never been to an Influence before, then look up the buddy program because it's useful. And if you have been to an Influence before, consider becoming a buddy.
I was a buddy.
There you go. So actually talk a little bit about that, Hayden.
I was assigned 2 people, one of them from our chapter. They try to get people who are first timers from your chapter. So I had that, and then another gentleman from California, and you talk with them ahead of time. You find out what they want to accomplish, kind of give them some guidance. In both cases, they wanted some guidance. And, in both cases, I was able to calibrate their expectations. One of them had some expectations that I thought that would be difficult to meet. So I thought that was my job to say, yeah, what you're looking for, you're probably not going to find. But in order to see about that, here's how you would go about. You're going to have to meet some people who will introduce you to some people that might be able to answer that question. And then we had a kickoff, and then we would just check in on them. Neither of them needed a lot of time and attention. Other people just kind of hung out together. So I asked what they wanted to do, and I have the kind of personality that both of them said, no, I'd rather be by myself.
I still see some of the ones that I hooked up with a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. So that's kind of fun to kind of see they're still doing okay, because we do have a pretty high dropout rate, I think, with first timers, like a lot of
we do. And see, obviously, Kevin, you are effective as a buddy. So. I went to a number of sessions, and I thought it was a good conference. There were some great highlights. And, there were more sessions I didn't get to go to Lynn's point than I got to go to. So I just started picking and going, okay, I'll listen to the recording of that. I added Patrick Ullman on Tuesday morning, how to easily master live and recorded video for your speaking business. I like that because he he actually brought his equipment and set it up on stage and said,
Oh,
here's how much this costs, here's how much this
Yeah.
costs. Doesn't take a lot. He gave a workflow process. What I thought one of the most effective things was, you know, a lot of people are big on 3-point lighting, and and then Jill Schimmelbein popped in, and he said, well, Jill, what's your opinion on it? He goes, well, actually, I know your opinion, but tell everybody else. And since that's kind of the thing she does as well, she could not say anything. And she uses one of those light rings. And instead of putting up all the lighting, she just puts a light ring on. And that's a nice, inexpensive. My son has an LED light ring he doesn't use. So I'm like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. And
What's a light ring? What's a light ring?
it is, you can look them up online. It is, it's an LED about this big. And so
Okay.
it just does bright light. And
It kind of looks like a halo.
Oh, okay. And you
It
put it
does.
behind you put it behind your computer.
yeah, so you would put it above your computer,
Okay.
and then it would light you up, give you front lighting. And she says that's good enough. That's what I use. I don't
That's
do
great.
the 3-point lighting. I don't have a lot of room in my office with my desk and all and credenza for 3-point lighting. And I have a son that's into video, and he's like, for about $700, Dad, we can install lights. Thank you for sharing.
Are you using it right now?
You know, right now I'm
Halo?
using a lamp that I took out of, my wife isn't particularly happy. I took a lamp out of our front room,
Oh, okay.
and it's standing on the credenza behind me, and I just have the overhead lights on.
Got it.
And that was a nice, cheap idea. And so there were some great things if you're into that. I qualified for the CSP this year, so I was able to go to those sessions. I thought that was, Barry Benther, I thought was exceptional as well. Matter of fact, I went back to my room, Kevin, and that night I spent 2 hours typing notes so I wouldn't forget things he said, just in case you couldn't get the recording. So
Yeah.
I was worried that somehow the recording would fail, because I knew that I knew his process was worth money. And I saw Sally Hogshead, and she had promised in her main event that you would get the word. That would be your word, the $5,000 word. And I waited in line for a half hour after it was over to ask her what that was. She goes, oh, I thought that it was your kind of uniqueness. That was the word. I guess I never explained that, did I? So I also passed it on to Beth, because Beth is like, I got to go eat lunch, but figure out what the answer is. And so that's the answer in case you listen to her main stage event. Great stuff.
Is she still doing that thing where it's like an assessment that gives
That's
you?
right. Yeah.
Okay.
And she handed it out. You can get it for free off her site as well.
Yeah.
It's great. And I also like the SEO session on findability. And it's worth listening to, because they just mentioned a bunch of resources. It was a little geeky.
Yeah.
We want to get them, get a couple of them to come in and work with our chapter. But if you want to up your SEO, then there's some great resources in there. And I'm going to have to go back through it. And
I attended that one too.
Yeah. Did any of you see anything that you said to yourself, that sucks, and I really don't ever want to do that myself? You know, you don't have to identify who it was, but did you
I
notice
will.
any
I actually
speaker
like
do
him and
something?
know him, but David Horsager is great, and he did a session I thought was really good. But it was on how I run a $10 million speaking business, and so it wasn't super helpful for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Because you're beyond that.
It was really good. I thought, but I thought it was a long, 90 minutes of things that were great ideas, but not directly applicable.
Because you're at the 20 or $30 million mark, is that why?
I'm so much farther than that. I just said, dude, you little small fry.
Yeah. You won the lotto the other night when you're out in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's exactly, and he does it with 5 staff. So that's what made me,
Yeah.
I both weeped and I think wet myself a little when I heard his business model and his numbers.
Did he just say what I thought he said? Yeah, Len, I want to apologize for all men. I'm continually amazed at when I go to NSA of how little interactivity there is in the sessions. It's still, so many of them still give the traditional talk, quote, quote. And instead of really understanding sort of the wisdom of the audience. And so That makes me a little nuts when that happens. Then when they do some good interaction, not just kind of turn to your neighbor and share an idea, but something that really is very, very helpful to, then I find that extremely interesting. And they can.
One that I thought was very good and a good example of that, Kevin, was I went to Kelly Swanson's session on storytelling.
Oh yeah.
And I think beforehand she had asked for a handful of volunteers. I think she got like 4 or 5 volunteers to come up and read their stories. And then, I mean, she basically turned it into a clinic, which was really neat.
Yeah.
I'd never seen her, met her before, but she was really, really funny.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good.
Those kinds of sessions are really valuable, I think, kind of like the ones where, that Lynn was talking about, where when you, the turn of a phrase, or how if you ask a question versus say something, I think those kind of, I guess we call clinic is a good way of saying it. It's good.
Well, here's a plug. It's one of the reasons why we changed. I talked right over you, Lynn.
No worries. A quick comment. So let me put in a plug for the speaker lab that Kevin and Cindy Maxey often do for us, and I think we're going to be tapping them to do it.
Good.
Year.
Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah.
Because you go in with, so this is a wonderful member benefit. These two professionals ask you to give a portion of your program, and you get to pick what that is.
Yeah.
And they listen carefully and watch astutely, and then give you their feedback on how to improve it.
Right.
So, for example, last spring, I attended Speaker Lab, and I was going to be giving a presentation before the International Conference on Nurses.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah, and one of the pieces of advice that they gave to me was I was talking about empathy, and they said, so one of the things you can do is you can ask people, because it's an international audience, what is the word for empathy in their language?
Right.
And I took their advice,
yeah,
and asked, and basically, and so the surprising thing was empathy is the same in pretty much every language. So I was expecting a bunch of different words, and it was the same word, but at the same time, then I could track that back to see it's all the same no matter what language we speak.
Right.
And it was not an idea I ever would have thought of. So if you're looking for clinics for your own work, you don't have to wait to go to Influence to do that. Take advantage of the opportunities we have here in the chapter. And thanks again to Kevin and Cindy.
You're welcome. Yeah, we had one in class. We do it at Loyola, and we had international students. And I remember this one time, I forget what the word was, empathy or self-discovery or something. And she told me, she said, well, it means empathy, or, I said, what does it really mean? She said, oh, it means you're sitting around at night with your grandmother and you're having a wonderful time together. Oh, is that what it means? Then all of a sudden the fullness of the word comes out, and I was talking to one of my African students once, and I said, I was over a barrel about something. And he looked at his buddy like, what? Over a barrel? What does that mean? And then all of a sudden they looked at each other and said, your cow fell in the river. I said, yes, that's exactly what I meant. My cow fell. Because apparently in his village, when the cow falls in the river, that is a major deal, because you got to get the whole village to get the damn thing out of the river. So, yeah, it's funny. Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. That was good. I'm glad that worked. Yeah. Right.
Well, let me build on Kevin's comment about the interactivity, and Kelly Swan, and especially Kevin, your comment about Carl saying Kelly Swanson brought people up and how valuable you find that. That's one of the reasons why in our live programs this year we've added an additional 45 minutes for people who are members, so that when the speaker's done, we actually cut the time they have and then added it back with do a case study, pick somebody, let us ask questions.
Yeah.
Create the kind of interactivity that makes it much more takeawayable, so that you've got some immediate questions. And so far, people have found that to be, we've only done it twice, but people have found it to be especially valuable.
That's great.
Andy Masters was great. Unfortunately, as Lynn said, you didn't get to hear his session, so you'll have to pump people who attended. Let's move on in our last couple of minutes to the final question.
By the way, did anybody do the Alan Weiss seminar the other day?
Yeah, I was with a client, but I did sign up, so hopefully I'll get to hear the recording.
I think it's recorded. Cindy said she tried to get on and had technical issues that were, but that's something that maybe all of us ought to remind everybody in the chapter that that's another member benefit for NSA. Yeah.
What takeaways? Community-wise, Bill talked about that a moment. Let's just spend a couple of minutes on that. Community. What do you think about the people you met, the culture of NSA? Why be a part of a chapter as well as go to the national event? Kevin, you did a great job explaining why you like the smaller winter event.
Yeah.
What do other people think about the community aspects?
I had the VIP banner or ribbon on my name tag because this was the first time I ever went.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that had something to do with people being extra nice to me, but I found people just being exceptionally kind and outgoing.
That's great.
But, you know, I mean, throughout my business career, I've done lots of conferences, and I'm not sugarcoating this. I really do believe this, was that I felt people at this conference were warmer and more cordial and just more like giving than I think I've ever experienced at any conference. I felt zero reservation about just sitting down next to a stranger and striking up a conversation. So I thought that was great. And I tried my best, even at the back of my notebook, to write down the names of every person that I met and to follow up with them afterwards and just say like, hey, great meeting you. I checked out your website, or, you know, if I think of something, I'll let you know. Just a sense of community that I had heard about, didn't believe would actually exist, but was very pleasantly impressed that it did.
Nice. That's great.
And just need to meet people all over the country.
Yeah, that's great.
Any other thoughts?
Well, just to echo what Carl said, there are plenty of times when, you know, when a meal is unstructured, a lunch or a breakfast, and it was easy just to sit down at a table where I didn't know anybody. And there have been events that I've been to where you sit down at a table and people are, you know, they have their clique and they're only going to talk to the people that they, you know, that they know.
Yeah.
And it truly was an opportunity to, you know, fall in with people there's nowhere else in the world I ever would have met. And, you know, and to ask them interesting questions and hear what they had to say about their experiences. And to a person, they were all interested in what everybody else at the table had to say as well.
Right.
And, you know, and that really, it really builds the community of speakers and the whole idea, the whole Cavett idea of, you know, there's a bigger pie out there.
Right.
Well, that ties to probably an important update. You can see it if you weren't there. I left at lunchtime, so I left right as Dan Thurman, the incoming president, did his 20-minute speech that they recorded. And part of what they were talking about is an assessment that's been done. NSA has a new director, and in many ways, I learned when I was there a new staff. A lot of their staff has turned over, and so they kind of looked at where it's at, and basically the Influence Conference has lost money for a number of years, and NSA doesn't have enough members to be financially stable long term. And so they're doing a number of things in a strategic plan. So it's worth looking up the link. You can find it on the website, if I remember right, and it's definitely in the Facebook group if you're a member. We probably, if I find it and get time, we should put it into a mailing. But it's worth watching kind of the update on how the organization says, hey, it's the spirit of Cavett, let's grow the pie. And if there's another 1,000 people, we all benefit and the industry benefits. And so let's grow the pie. It not only helps us. And by the way, one of the key things, if you're a member and you've not filled out the health assessment, even if you get health insurance through a significant other or a spouse, fill the thing out, because they sent a notice that they've got a week and they're still 200 people away from being able to get an assessment on whether or not NSA can get health insurance. And it's one of those things where 1,000 more members, it wouldn't even be a question.
Right.
But we're small enough where things like that would really help people. So if you got this far and you haven't filled it out, go download it right now. Seriously, go download it right now, because there's some people who this will make the difference between they're having a good year and a struggling year. And And so, help.
And one
help.
of them may be you.
No, that's exactly right. One of them could be you.
And we talked about at the former
Please,
president's breakfast the other day, we talked about membership, that the Windy City Toastmasters has 30 or 40 people in it. And then Professional Speakers of Illinois still kind of struggles, but not all those Windy City Toastmasters are members. So, I think just making inroads, suggesting it to people so that they find the benefit as well. And Hayden, if you want to, I know I sent you a truckload of information.
Oh, it's great.
Don't hesitate to send that to everybody who's on the call tonight. So one of them is from a friend of mine who's from England, who did a summary of the convention, and I did a summary of some stuff. So feel free.
No, that's right. There's some additional things, and I thought we would attach that with the recommended.
Great.
Well, we are wrapping the top
Thanks
of
for
the
doing
hour,
it.
and we promised people an hour. What were your takeaways? What have you actually implemented?
I've become a lot more organized and a lot more micro in my attention to each presentation. Even if it's the same presentation that I've done before, I'm very, very attuned to both the theatrical elements as well as the teaching elements and the effective elements. So I'm sort of digging down into what is it that actually makes that concept work for people. And then I feel a lot more organized as a result of them. Well,
Kevin, where'd that come from? What struck you at the session that led you to?
I think I ran into somebody who, or a couple of people, and I asked them how they stay organized, and they were telling me some very, very simple ideas to do it. And so I finally came back and said, I just have to stop the chaos. People would ask me, how big is your, what do you call it when you've got everybody's names and addresses?
Rolodex?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I have 2 bankers boxes, so that's how ridiculous it is. So.
Well, ladies and gents, I just want to stress again what Kevin kicked us off with when he said, I go for what happens between the sessions.
Yeah.
And what a perfect example, Kevin, is I was like, you mentioned a number of things you learned, and then on the other hand, the thing that you're actually implementing wasn't any of the sessions you mentioned. And so what a great illustration of the additional value. I find that to be the case as well. Doing programming and, being asked to do programming about a week and a half before Influence, being able to go up to some of the people who would be very difficult to ping and ask to come. And then, catch Roy Vaden right after the session as he's walking with Jay Baer, and Bill goes up to him and goes, hey, Rory, hey, would you come to our chapter? And he goes, well, I'm usually not able to, but I'm in between businesses. And then he said, hey, Jay, would you come? And Jay's like, I'm not letting Rory go to your chapter and then me not. So we'll let him, I'm going to ask him to headline next year. We'll literally be able to get, we had everybody recruited, and we'll literally be able to get both years done just from one Influence. So for me, that was kind of amazing. Just how much easier it allows us to get some incredibly high caliber folks. And then I paid the $400 to go early to the David Arvin session. I know Lynn had already been to the 2-day version of that. I got the down and dirty, went back to the room that night because they weren't recording it, went back to the room that night and wrote up, finalized 12 pages of notes. So I got my money's worth, and that's what I'm implementing. And if anybody wants to join me, I've got the year. They had a special promotion for that associationexecutive.com, where all the current information on all the association executives. It's about $700. They were able to get it for $300 a year, and I and another person are sharing it, and we can take another couple more, as Andy Matthews mentioned. They do that in their chapter. So if anybody wants to join Jill and I on that, we could slice the cost down to less than 100 a piece. And then, so my admin is now sending very customized things to people. And now that I'm off the road, off a mad tear, we'll focus on 4 industries, particularly that are particularly hot in the generational space, because in 3% unemployment, they can't hire people. So for me, that's that'll be a way to finally do some marketing and not just I wait for a lot of leads to come, but not a good way to have a long-term stable business.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the best things that David Arvin said. He said, I was hanging out after my best year about 4 years ago, and it was David Horsager who said, well, you don't have a business, David Arvin. You've got a good year. A business means that you know what you're going to do to have a great year next year and the year after and the year after that. And he said, I didn't sleep much that whole night because I thought, I don't have a business. I just wait for people to ping me on the phone to ring.
Yeah.
And I have to figure out how to do a business. And so I thought that was an interesting thing. And I can relate to that. I don't have a business. I just get speakers bureaus to book me. And that's a pretty vulnerable way to run things. So I'm hard at work on that. Carl, anything you're implementing to put you on the spot?
So before I even signed up, I had reached out to Sima and to Amy Samados, and I said to them, I'm thinking about going to Influence. But here's the thing is I'm a little bit nervous to go and feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose, given that I know a lot of the key elements that I need to focus on to grow my business. And so I didn't really go down there with the intent of like learning things that I didn't know about before. I kind of just went down to say like, I'll see what I see. I'll hear what I hear, but I know what I already need to do in the business. And I actually think that was pretty consistent with when I came home. I think that when I came home, I just came home with a whole lot more motivation, a whole lot more enthusiasm for this business and for this profession. I think it upped my commitment to NSA as a whole. Again, I've only been in NSA for about 2.5 years, but I think that I've doubled down on what it represents and what it can do. And I also think that even to the point I raised with Mark Levy's program is just to get very, very, very laser focused on what really matters instead of say, oh, here are all these different things that I could be implementing in my business. Like, no, I'm going to focus on what is the nearest term, the highest impact, and what's right in front of me that's going to make the biggest amount of difference. And everything else, it's a nice to know, but it's not a must know, must have. That's for a whole nother year. And then one final point with my buddy who was in the buddy program. He didn't look like that old of a guy, but he told me that it was his 20th year going to Influence. And I was just like, it's amazing that people go year after year after year after year and say, I remember my very first one. And so it was kind of neat to be in that same space saying, you know what, I'm doubling down on this organization. And I hope that I can look back in 20 years and remember my first one in Dallas. So it was just the momentum, the community, the connection, and the reinforcement that I'm doing a lot of the right things and to get rid of the things I wasn't doing right. Yeah. So I think those were my takeaways.
Lynn, don't want you to put it on the spot because I know you've had, being president and then all kinds of things going on in business and life. Are there some things that you've been able to do in the last 3 months?
No.
Well, we're keeping you busy leading us, so we thank you for that.
She knows how to follow up from a meeting. The email we all got from the past president's meeting was immediate, and it was specific, and it was really good. So
she's a good writer, isn't she?
Yeah. I mean, it showed you really were hitting the ground running. So,
well, and and I'll be straight with you. I took a lot of notes. They're sitting in a file right here. There are things. What I promised myself is that by the end of the year, I will sort through, and now with the help of the audio, I can rehear the things that I listen to.
Right.
Exactly. Therefore, and really prioritize stuff because, as Carl said, and I heard about it as well too. This is like drinking from a fire hose. Yeah. And when I was at the event, because I've been to things that have been much more fire hosey-ish, and realized that, as usual, I am the only person that prevents me from walking away with the important stuff. And what that usually means is just literally setting aside the time, sift through things, and figure out, yes, well, here are all these great things. Let me cross-reference, what I learned here and what I learned here, and pull this stuff together for me, and pick out the literally handful of things that it makes sense for me to do. And, you know, and that is a process I still need to find some time to do. And my commitment is to do it before year end.
Great. Great.
Well, hey, thank you so much for taking your time, influence attenders, to record this. I know we had people had requested it, and I'm glad we were able to deliver on it finally. And on top of that, I think it's a great way for people who hear the recording to get an idea of you know, whether or not the Influence Conference is for them, and kind of the different reasons people go. Since you know, nobody has been in NSA as long as Kevin has. And, you know, Bill is definitely second longest of those of us who were on the call, who were, you know, facilitating the call. I know we've got some attenders who have been longer than, you know, than some of us newer bees. And so I think it's great to hear the reasons why people will go to the different conferences. And thanks for taking the time. Those of you who are listening, it's a great thing to do. I'm not an every year person. I know a lot of people, that's what they do every year. I find I learn more. To summarize it, what Carl said, I find I learn more in terms of how to run my business because Chicago chapter, Illinois chapter, we bring in some of the best of influence. So if you'll show up for things, you'll get about a day and a half's worth of influence level stuff. But it's the inspiration, and it's meeting people, and it's remembering why you do what you do that I find that the Influence Conference is really, Carl, kind of best at. So I definitely learned things about the business. Like Lynn, I spent about 3 hours. I had a bunch of plane flights, so I spent about 4 hours going through my notes. But the inspiration of it is, you know, you can't beat influence for thinking, I'm glad I do this. All right, everybody, have a great rest of the week. Have a great evening. Carl, go kiss those kiddos.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.